Sarah Sullivan, a pediatric nurse practitioner and single mother, watches her young son Ethan fight leukemia. Her wealthy parents spend lavishly on her sister's wedding instead of using a $150,000 trust set aside for Ethan's education and medical care. Sarah borrows heavily to save her son, later discovers the trust existed and sues her parents for breach of fiduciary duty. After a judge rules in her favor, she publicly exposes the betrayal at a hospital gala, breaks family bonds, and rebuilds a life with legal control of the trust, community support, and a healed son. The private dining room at Riverside sits hushed under a chandelier's polite light. Water gleams beyond the windows, a ribbon of glass and city noise. The table smells faintly of lemon meringue and a scotch too old to hide secrets. Jessica's engagement ring catches the chandeliers and refracts a dozen small admirations. Around the table, the country club smiles settle into place like uniforms. Patricia's fingers hover over a Hermes clasp as if it comforts her. Michael puffs out a practiced pride and raises his glass. Our Jessica deserves the wedding of her dreams, he offers, and that sentence is a neat seal on everyone's expectations. Sarah sits at the edge of the table like a punctuation mark. Her hands are warm from holding Ethan, who is supposed to be playing quietly but sits coloring with an intensity that hints at his stillness. Sarah's life is a different light, clinical, efficient, measured, hospital rhythms rather than social ones. She drove her old Honda here, not because she wanted to prove anything, but because it's reliable when the rest of life isn't. The word help feels heavier tonight than the tuna tartare on her plate. This opening is not just about inequality, it is about language. Jessica speaks in curated images, Pinterest boards, designer fittings, itineraries that are half dream and half ledger. Sarah speaks in prognosis charts and medication schedules. Where Jessica layers silk, Sarah layers contingency plans. Neither is better, their languages just keep them from translating into one another. Ethan tugs at a napkin and catches Sarah's eye. He looks like any other 5-year-old, hopeful, accidental, bright in his earnestness. No one notices. Sarah smiles because she is a professional at slipping solace into the margins. Her mother claps at Jessica's announcement and pats Sarah's hand with the politeness of someone who assumes she is seen. You'll help plan, right? Patricia says the phrasing is ornamental, a request framed so that the absence of refusal will read like devotion. Sarah nods. It's the right answer for a daughter who has learned to be the glue. But the scene holds another chord, the ledger of family choices. Michael's leather-bound order, the country club's low murmur, all of it suggests a life ordered by perception. When a family's worth is measured in appearances, the stakes get mathematically cruel. Budgets will balance on who is allowed to be visible and who can quietly carry the cost. The camera would linger here on hands, the polished ring, the thin hospital wristband Sarah briefly remembers, the way a father's fingers hover over a brochure for a waterfront venue as if it were a map to what matters. This opening needs to do two things in one shot: show the glitter that buys applause and the invisible ledger where love sometimes gets drafted into expense. It whispers a future argument, not yet voiced, but already mapped in the distances between a mother's clutch and a son's coloring book. The narrative pulse arrives quietly, a life lived by care meets a world rehearsed for spectacle. And when the applause for an engagement ring softens, the room exhales into the ordinary. Drinks, gossip, plans. Nobody sees the small, deliberate step Sarah takes away from the table to check Ethan's shoes. That step, invisible now, prepares for the first of many runs toward the hospital that will come to define her loyalty in ways even she cannot yet imagine. For months after the engagement, a soccer ball ricochets off a shin and out of childhood. Ethan is carried into a bright, too efficient emergency room where the lights hum like refrigeration. Dr. Rachel Kim's office smells like sanitizer and coffee, diplomas on the wall tilting as if to witness new grief. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, she says carefully. Sarah hears the words as if they land in her mouth, heavy, foreign. For the first time, the practical lists she keeps, schedules, med orders, billing codes, feel like an insufficient toolbox against words that mean mortality. There is an immediacy to this moment. Sarah tests as a perfect donor. The transplant is their rope. The cost is the hook, $85,000 beyond what insurance will loosen. The number is clinical and monstrous all at once. Sarah's chest tightens with arithmetic. Her life is a ledger of good deeds and small salaries. She is a nurse practitioner, a single mother, a woman with a mortgage and $4,000 in savings. She calculates every option like a clinician calculating dosage. No one is surprised when she composes herself. Her profession has taught her how to move through emergencies with a calm that masks tremors. We see her go to the one place she thinks will answer, her parents' mahogany office. The office is a chapel to planning, framed certificates, a single leather chair where decisive sentences are born. Michael, comfortable with the language of investment, receives the dossier like it is another spreadsheet, and he treats it with the same care. He hears $85,000, and something in him aligns with a financial plan he protects like a prayer. Patricia clasps Sarah's hand with the gentleness of someone who also counts pennies in the currency of appearances. What will it look like to draw from an account? They negotiate a narrative. Weddings are once-in-a-lifetime events. Medical care has payment plans. The tautness in Sarah's throat is not only anger, but a syllabus on what her family values, what they will spend for spectacle, and what they will deem solvable by other resources. Cut to hospital nights. Sarah's feet ache from overtime. Hospital corridors become the home she sleeps in while Ethan fights through chemo. Scenes flicker, a morphine drip, a child with a bald small head, Sarah smoothing a fevered forehead, the world narrowed to lines and machines. The money grows like a shadow. Every shift increases the clock of exhaustion. Each payment plan chips at her sleep. She mortgages her house at brutal rates, takes a hospital hardship grant, and watches strangers on crowdfunding pages string small kindnesses into lifelines. Meanwhile, Jessica posts turquoise water and private dinners, a sunlit honeymoon that looks like an alternate future posted in motion. The tension here compounds because it is both external and intimate. Externally, the clock on Ethan's survival is real, and every refusal feels like a mathematical subtraction from his chances. Intimately, each refusal cuts into the trust Sarah carries for her parents. There is a scene of small betrayals that accumulates into moral debt, a caller asking Sarah to read at the wedding, a silk-covered invitation that her mother gestures toward as though the two items, saving a grandchild and designing a guest list, can be prioritized in the same breath. The camera should linger on the little gestures, a father's hand smoothing wedding brochures, a mother's mouth forming, "We can't disrupt our planning," Sarah's fingers tracing the edge of a hospital bill. At home, medication boxes line the kitchen like a suburban still life interrupted. She eats ramen to save money, counting pills and calories and interest rates. In the quiet hours, she compiles emails, dates, denials, requests. Dr. Kim's advice, document everything, slips from practical clinic speak into a battlefield strategy. Sarah becomes meticulous, not because she enjoys the process, but because the record will be the only thing that can be measured against their selective charity. This is where the story thickens. A daughter looms between duty and betrayal. A mother abides between social prestige and human cost. Everything is being recorded, not only for court, but for the moment when the ledger of decisions will be read aloud. For now, the stakes build in the unnatural quiet of things that go unsaid, in receipts that pile up, and in a child who, when sicker, still offers a smile that recalibrates whatever calculation the world is trying to make without him. The letter arrives on a Tuesday, not dramatic, just a flat envelope with an official header that feels like a misdelivered lifeline. Sarah finds it amid medical statements and junk mail, skimming its first sentences before she realizes what she's holding, a trust established by her late grandparents, activated years ago, designated for Ethan's education and medical care. $150,000. The sum sits in legal language, sterile yet incandescent, because it is precisely the amount that would have prevented many sleepless nights. The discovery is not cinematic fireworks. It is quieter, the slow, devastating realization that the margin between ruin and rescue existed and was ignored. Her stomach drops in a way that feels like the body catching on a new truth. Fury follows like a second wave, but it's channeled, controlled. She calls the law firm. Here's the phrase she needed: breach of fiduciary duty. The words map a new battlefield where legal mechanisms can align with moral outrage. This is the story's pivot. Knowledge changes the problem. Up to now, Sarah has been reactive, gathering shifts, drumming up crowd funds. Now she becomes strategic. Attorney Hayes's office smells of leather and law books and patient concentration. He lays terms out clearly: evidence, timeline, notice, legal grounds for removal as trustees. Sarah spreads out her documentation like surgical instruments, emails, dates of requests, insurance denials, and the ledger of wedding payments that coincides with the period of her son's crisis. The legal machine is not instantaneous. It requires patience and proof. The midpoint twist is procedural but emotionally volcanic, the kind of shift that converts raw hurt into actionable power. We also see the human cost of this revelation in smaller moments. Sarah calls her parents. Their faces go blank, the practiced veneer slips. There is a frantic choreography now: Michael buying time, Patricia softening the edges with disclaimers about preserving a future. In their versions, the trust was complicated and reserved phrases that sound like plausible deniability until the courtroom will parse them. Jessica's phone call is another layer. She is frantic now for a different reason: the honeymoon debt, the conflict spilling into the marriage. Her guilt is present but thin. It's not yet a full apology so much as a crumpled defense. The midpoint twist gives Jessica an opportunity for complexity. Will she side with the life she's been promised or the brother she betrayed? Practically, the legal filings move the pace into 3 months of waiting, court dockets, deposition days, the quiet math of litigant work. This waiting feels different than the earlier waiting on results of chemo. It's a deliberate kind, a pressure that builds until it must be aired publicly. Sarah arranges the evidence into a presentation that's both forensic and human: photos of Ethan's treatment contrasted with wedding invoices, a timeline that reads like an indictment. At the pivot, the protagonist shifts from desperate mother to prepared plaintiff. The moral clarity has turned into kinetic force. The audience, now invested emotionally, braces. Knowledge has been found, and knowledge demands reckoning. The courtroom scene breaks like a held breath. Small, wood-paneled, it's light, procedural, and impartial. It is where private betrayals are given public weight. Hayes presents the case with the precise economy of trained rhetoric, stringing together dates and emails, juxtaposing medical urgency with indulgent expenditures. The judge's impartial face is a cold surface for something that feels hot enough to melt paper. When the bench grants Sarah control of the trust and notes the breach of fiduciary duty, it is not triumph so much as legal restoration: the ledger corrected, some debt relieved, a measure of accountability delivered with judicial finality. But legal victory is not the emotional summit, it is a pivot into exposure. The gala invitation arrives like a moral crescendo: a pediatric cancer fundraiser at the same waterfront venue where Jessica married. The program lists Sarah as a featured speaker. Her parents are on the host committee. It is a designed collision. Between the court victory and the gala, Sarah prepares differently, not vindictive, but meticulous. Her slide deck is forensic and intimate: Ethan's hospital photos, the timeline, the trust documents, the court ruling. She practices a speech that is steady, not theatrical, because truth, well-ordered and staring plainly, will deny her critics easy deniability. In the days before the gala, social choreography attempts damage control. Michael and Patricia pivot their narratives to friends and committees. We were preserving a future. Jessica scrambles to stitch public sympathy into a torn fabric. Invitations circulate. Whispers begin. Sarah steels herself in quieter spaces: late-night revisions, a mother tucking sheets around her son, a child asking if she is nervous. The domestic moments temper the spectacle. Ethan's small, simple trust that his mother will do what she must anchors the coming storm in human terms. The gala itself is an exercise in contrasts. Crystal chandeliers, string lights reflected on water, donors in gowns and tuxedos. The room smells of expensive perfume and a genuine charity's mission. Sarah and Ethan walk in together. He is 11 now, hair thick and smiling, an emblem of survival. The crowd offers polite congratulations, the usual rituals of philanthropy and praise. Sarah's parents sit at a table that used to be their social anchor, now a fragile island. When Patricia sees the program, she realizes she will not be spared the light she thought would flatter her choices. The social temperature shifts from polite to feverish. On stage, the projection of Ethan as a hospital child gives the room a communal memory of what the disease looked like when hope was fragile. The room leans into the narrative that rescue is possible: doctors, funders, advocates. Then Sarah lays out the timeline and the trust. The visual comparison is brutal and simple: wedding expenditures, trust funds untouched, debt accumulated. Gasps ripple. The moral indictment is quiet but precise: documentation, dates, documented requests, documented refusals. The crowd's murmurs become pressure. An audience that had once been a background of applause now feels like a living jury. Sarah's voice remains measured. Her anger is converted into instruction. She lists practical lessons for families facing crisis: document, ask about hidden funds, insist on clarity. The tone readjusts the room from spectacle to accountability. Her parents' table sits threatened by the rearranged social order. The fallout is immediate: distance, avoidance, invitations evaporate. The social capital once used to gloss choices drains away. The climax is being staged. Legal victory catalyzes public exposure, and the exposure forces consequences within the community that once cushioned the family's choices. It is not a shout that breaks them. It is the weight of evidence displayed on a ballroom screen. The slideshow's last image is the trust document: legal header, clear allocation for medical care, and beneath it the court's ruling that removes Michael and Patricia as trustees. The audience watches the equation: $150,000 unused versus $97,000 debt. The arithmetic reads like moral proof. Sarah's words are plain: I asked for help. I documented it. They chose otherwise. A hush rolls across the crowd, not merely surprise, but a collective moral recalibration. For the Sullivans, the assault is social and existential. Patrons who once wanted proximity now seek distance. Club committees whisper. Michael's consulting contracts start to look like liabilities. Patricia's committees loosen her grip. The couple experience a swift erosion of social standing. Invitations cease, committee roles dissolve, and a house that once showed their taste now seems too expensive for a community that values reputation more than restitution. The consequences are not intended vengeance. They are natural social responses to a revealed moral calculus. But the climax is not only about punishment. It is also a reckoning for Sarah. Standing on stage, she is not triumphant. Her relief is practical: debt relief, legal control, but the deeper victory is a moral clearing. She has refused to erase the truth. The community's reaction validates not the spectacle of revenge, but the right of a mother to insist on accountability. People approach afterward with a mixture of sympathy and awe. Dr. Kim clutches her hand. The hospital president praises the bravery. Yet when Sarah looks to the table where her parents sit, she meets different faces. Her mother weeping small helpless tears, her father stunned into silence, Jessica pale, as if finally seeing what privilege cost them. Confrontation happens after the applause, not on stage. In a shadowed parking lot, the family collapses into raw human language. Patricia's shriek of, "How could you humiliate us?" meets Sarah's cool retort, "I told the truth." Michael tries a strategic pivot: "We were preserving a future," and Sarah replies with surgical calm, "He almost didn't have a future." The words land like a verdict between them. The conversation becomes a mirror. The parents' attempt to justify choices shows a fundamental misalignment on values. Sarah's refusal to pretend restores agency. She will not allow her son to be a memory used to soften a ledger. The climax's emotional force is in the small details. The way security quietly steps between the two tables, an ex-friend shifting seats to avoid proximity. Jessica's phone call to Sarah confessing that the honeymoon debt has bankrupted their attempts at keeping up appearances. These micro-moments magnify the moral logic. The truth's exposure accelerates consequences that had been latent but real. Social sanctions follow legal ones, and while the latter repays some debt, the former strips the family of the armor that allowed their choices. This is also the moment of transformation for Sarah's identity. No longer only a caregiver at the bedside, she becomes a public advocate, the voice other parents recognize. The courtroom ruling reassigns fiduciary responsibility, but the gala reveals a deeper social principle: that silence enables harm. Her final line that night, practical, instructive, restrained, is not a flourish but a command: document, ask, defend your children. This is the emotional core, a mother's love converted into evidence and shared as a map for others. The climax doesn't heal everything, but it forces an honest reordering of consequences and loyalties. The months after the gala are quieter than the courtroom echoes, almost domestic in their unfolding. The legal settlement trickles in as scheduled payments. The trust's remainder is invested. The Sullivans downsize, not into penury, but into a smaller life without the social scaffolding that once smoothed inconvenient truths. Their phones ring less. Invitations stop. The public consequences are proportionate to the breach. The family's social bubble punctures and leaks. For Sarah and Ethan, the aftermath is less cinematic and more human. She pays off debt, reorders her finances, refinances her mortgage on steadier terms. Ethan plays soccer again, scoring goals with no camera required. The small routines, tucked-in sheets, homework, ice cream after games, become the architecture of their repaired life. There is a domestic tenderness that no courtroom verdict can manufacture. Nights when television is background noise and the quiet in the kitchen is the sound of ordinary survival. At his request, they visit the hospital fundraiser in quieter years, not as combatants, but as contributors. Sarah now runs a family support program. Her speech becomes a template for workshops and support groups, and other parents arrive with their own stories of quiet betrayal and small victories. Jessica's life fractures differently. Therapy begins as a tentative expression of remorse. She loses clients, friendships, and parts of the social identity that once wrapped her in privilege. Her marriage frays under the weight of choices that look different in daylight than they did under wedding bulbs. There are phone calls that are awkward, apologies that are insufficient, and one or two tentative coffees where she tries to become a person beyond the label of golden child. The arc is not vengeance, but slow, possible healing. Sarah keeps the door ajar but establishes firm boundaries. Sarah's final transformation is neither punitive nor saintly. It is pragmatic courage. She no longer waits for others to be moral. She organizes support groups, helps parents understand trust law and documentation, and teaches how to translate grief into paperwork and then into protections. She sleeps better because she has taught her son that he is valuable in both word and quantified care. Ethan's simple question, "Are we going to be okay?" becomes the signature line of the ending. She answers, plain and true, "We already are." The phrase is small, and it contains a great deal: survival, legal restitution, emotional maturation. The story closes on a detail rather than a verdict: a soccer field at sunset, the way light hits Ethan's hair as he runs, dribbling a ball that is ordinary and miraculous. Parents clap. Sarah sits among them, a woman who has learned the utility of boundaries and the dignity of saying no to those who prioritize show over substance. The camera pulls back slowly, leaving them in the frame, not triumphant, not unscarred, but together. The last line is an invitation: protect your children, document your fights, and remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be complicit in your own erasure. Sarah's story becomes a small manual in courage for others, a calling card for those who will come after, needing to know that truth matters and that survival sometimes requires legal action, loud honesty, and the painful, healing work of building a life that honors what really counts.